Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. We acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today or who are watching the live stream of this ceremony. My name is Joanna Butler. We warmly welcome the families of Private George Leonard and Private Harold West. Their story will be told shortly by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph West from the Australian Army, a proud Murawari man and descendant of Private Harold West. This evening's Last Post ceremony tells the story of two Aboriginal servicemen as part of NAIDOC Week, in which we celebrate the history, culture, and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and recognise them as the traditional custodians of the land. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have a long and proud history of fighting for country and continue to serve with honour among our military forces. From resistance during the colonisation of Australia, they have served with honour in every conflict and commitment involving Australian defence contingents, from the Boer War to the present day. This NAIDOC Week, Australians from all walks of life reflect on the contribution and commitment of our Indigenous peoples. In 2019, Murawari elders, including elders who are descendants of Harold West and George Leonard, presented a kangaroo skin with the Ode of Remembrance, written in both the Murawari language and English, to the then Chief of Army, Lieutenant Colonel Rick Burr, gifting the ode in Murawari language to the Australian Army. Today, the Murawari elders have gifted the ode in language to the Australian War Memorial. This gift is proudly displayed this evening by the Pool of Reflection. We are honoured to acknowledge the Murawari elders who have joined us for this evening's ceremony, and Lieutenant General Susan Coyle, Chief of Joint Capabilities. We warmly welcome the delegation representing the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by Murawari elders, the families of Private George Leonard and Private Harold West, and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones, buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Leonard and Private Harold West. It is in honour of the proud tradition of Indigenous Australian service that we tell their story today. Murawari man George Leonard was born on the 25th of December 1910 on Kamilaroi country at Narrabri in New South Wales. He was the younger of two sons born to Archie Leonard and his wife Miriam Mosley. His brother Jack died in 1915, aged 11. 2 years later, his father enlisted for service in the Australian Imperial Force. Archibald served with the 3rd Light Horse Field Ambulance until the end of the war. Miriam died in 1921, leaving Archie to raise young George alone. By the late 1930s, George was living with his de facto wife Clara Barden at the Aboriginal Reserve in Gaduga, New South Wales, known as the Tin Camp. The couple had a child, Clifford George Leonard, born on the 11th of February 1939. Also living at Gaduga was George's best friend and fellow Murawari man, Harold West. His de facto wife, Doris, and their child. Harold West was born on the 21st of May 1911 at Wheelmaringle in northern New South Wales. One of 10 children born to Herbert and Aggie West. He grew up on the border between New South Wales and Queensland, where he was taught to hunt, track and live off the land. As adults living in Gaduga, George and Harold worked as trackers, station hands, ring barkers and casual labourers. Harold in particular was a highly regarded tracker. It was said he could track a black ant up a crowbar after 6 inches of rain. In August 1941, George and Harold travelled nearly 800 kilometres to Paddington in Sydney, where they signed their enlistment papers for the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, together on the 23rd of August 1941. George's attestation papers contain a handwritten note from the recruiting officer, Aboriginal. The pair spent 3 days at the General Details Depot in Sydney before being allotted to the 5th Training Battalion at Tamworth. George was admitted to the Red Cross home suffering from influenza in late September 1941, before returning to duty in mid-October, and was granted 9 days pre-embarkation leave with Harold. Privates George Leonard and Harold West departed Australia on the 2nd of November 1941, sailing from Sydney as part of the 13th convoy. While at sea, they found themselves in trouble with the military authorities, Harold for threatening a superior officer and George for failing to appear at a parade. Arriving in the Middle East, they passed the winter training with the 16th Australian Infantry Training Battalion. Harold again ran afoul with military authorities and was confined to barracks for 7 days in January after being found beyond the limits of the camp. George and Harold were taken on strength of the 2nd 1st Battalion in February 1942. The battalion left the Middle East in March, heading for the war against Japan in the Pacific, but was diverted to defend Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka, from possible Japanese attack. George and Harold arrived in Melbourne in August and were granted a brief period of leave before embarking for Port Moresby. They were thrown into the fighting along the Kokoda Trail almost immediately. Fighting to ensure the Japanese would not capture Port Moresby, the Kokoda Trail saw some of the most desperate and vicious fighting encountered in the Second World War. Over 2/3 of the 2nd 1st Battalion were killed, wounded or evacuated between September 1942 and January 1943. The battalion first contacted the Japanese forward of Eora Creek village on the 21st of October. The main engagement began the next morning. Heavy Japanese fire stalled the Australian advancement behind the bare ridge on which the village stood. The men were not able to cross the creek until the darkness of the early hours 2 days later. During the fighting on the 23rd of October, Private George Leonard was killed in action. He was 32 years old. Distraught at the loss of his best mate, Harold engaged in increasingly risky one-man attacks against the Japanese. Leaving his unit, he would disappear for days at a time to hunt Japanese machine gun posts. Using his skills as a bushman tracker, Harold would move stealthily behind enemy lines, sneaking slowly towards Japanese positions before throwing grenades and then vanishing back into the shadows. Harold's stealth and skill earned him the moniker, the Ghost of Kokoda, and he became renowned amongst his fellow soldiers. While he managed to avoid capture by the Japanese, Harold broke his leg on one of his solo missions. Evacuated to the 2nd 9th Australian General Hospital at Port Moresby, and on the 21st of November 1942, he was also seriously ill with scrub typhus. Private West died of disease on the 26th of November 1942. He was 31 years old. Harold was buried at the Port Moresby Bamana War Cemetery the day he died. George's remains were never recovered from the battlefield outside of Eora Creek. Today is commemorated on the Port Moresby Memorial at Bamana War Cemetery, alongside the almost 750 Australians who lost their lives in operations in Papua and who have no known graves. George and Harold's names are also listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, amongst almost 440,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. We now remember Private George Leonard and Private Harold West, who gave their lives for us, our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.